I'd like now to give the floor to Mikael Anzén. And Mikael Anzén has two hats today. So here is representing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, and Sweden was the previous chair of the Arctic Council. And he is also deputy chair of the Arctic Council Sustainable Development Working Group, and senior official to Barents Euro-Arctic Council and Council of Baltic Sea States. So, Mikael, please, or if you want to make it from there, it's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Does it work? Hello? Yeah, it works. It's in order to save time, I will sit here. So, thank you for that. Thank you for the invitation, for being here, and for the organizers, and for you to participate on this panel. It's an honor. The first thing I will do is to take off those both hats that you just presented, because I will speak in my personal capacity, of course with some experience from the both hats that I'm normally wearing. And just to refer what we've been doing for the last couple of years. Sweden chaired the Arctic Council for 2 years, so we just stepped out of that very intensive period. And I was chairing one of the working groups, the Sustainable Development Working Group. So we were starting to look on those issues, but the topic for today's panel is even deeper down on concrete issues than we actually came. First to say what happened during the Swedish chairmanship, I think just to see how the Arctic Council evolved during this period. We had an Arctic Council Secretariat installed in Tromsø with a director and a budget. We also adopted the Kiruna Declaration, the Kiruna Vision, and also, related to today's topic, an agreement on oil spill. So all in all, we believe that we kind of pushed the Arctic agenda forward, and this is very important. And we are confident now that Canada will be able to take the torch and do the very good job on this. Particularly on Sustainable Development Working Group and on this topic, we focused on two issues, and those are sustainable development, or CSR in the Arctic, what could be done there, and also a dialogue with the business community. Why we chose those two issues was because we saw that there was a lack of business knowledge within the Arctic Council. So we saw that this was needed in order to understand the very complex picture of what we see in the Arctic today. So that idea started with an informal dialogue and has evolved now to be a task force. And under Canadian leadership, it's now evolving to see how this dialogue could be set up in a more systemic manner. So that's interesting development of how this kind of issues will in the future be brought up in the framework of the Arctic Council. On the CSR, sustainable business in the Arctic, I will speak on that later on today, but that is a track that is now ongoing within the Sustainable Development Working Group, and I think that's a very important topic on how we, in this dialogue with business, see what the business itself can do, and I will talk about that later today in this workshop. So, coming back to the very topic of today, I think I here now will be a little bit more provocative, because coming from Sweden, subsidies is something we are not embracing a lot. Working in Brussels, which I did before, and on trade policy, Sweden is often called free trade Talibans. So what does that mean? Well, the Swedish policy on trade policy is rather close to the academic view on the free trade. So we are not much embracing the different subsidy schemes or any schemes that could distort the free trade. So that, therefore, it becomes very difficult for us to see the benefit of subsidies, since our overall view of the trade is that it should stay free. So it means that subsidies tend to distort the market access, it distorts trade, and it also distorts resource allocation. So if you take a step back and look on what subsidies actually can bring to it, in a first step, it could bring benefits to local regions and certain companies or sectors, but in the long run, it's distorting more than it's gaining. So what kind of examples do we have of this? Well, in Sweden, for example, we abolished completely the agriculture subsidies in the beginning of the 90s. That was a rather big step, but the step was so big, so when we entered into the European Union in 95, we had to bring them back. And this is something that we learned from. If we then talk about the energy sector, which we see here today, is there a need of subsidies to the energy sector? Well, arguments could be said that for some, renewable energies, and we have seen 2 cases recently in Sweden on this. One is on wind and solar power, and the other is on biofuels. And both those has now, with a little bit more facts, seem to be, even those has been very problematic. Because on the wind and solar power, the wind power, for example, it's, if you talk to the reindeer herders in the Arctic, it's not evident that the benefits for them and the reindeer herding is not there. And also economically viable, it could be discussed. The same thing goes for the biofuels, which when we talk about ethanol in the cars, which the Swedish government actually subsidized. Now it turned out that the carbon footprint of this ethanol subsidies seems to be both non-efficient and also trade distorting. So one more time, subsidies is a very complex issue and not evident in order to get what we're actually looking for. So without really mentioning the oil and gas sector, but knowing that this sector is one of the richest sector in the world and also leaving a major carbon footprint, I would put a big question mark whether this is needed. Instead we could develop public-private partnerships and see how it could be developed in a dialogue between the government and the private business. I will stop there. Thank you.